The Kyrie Irving drama in Brooklyn continues, but the Nets do get a win. Pascal Siakam is a force. Plus, are the Jazz for real? This is Locked On NBA.
You are Locked On NBA, your daily NBA podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome to Locked On NBA, your daily source of all things NBA from the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Thanks for joining us and making us part of your day and your week here on all platforms, including YouTube. We appreciate you making us your first listen. You can catch us on Spotify and YouTube and Apple Podcasts and Caster and all Odyssey app and all sorts of great things. Make sure to follow us wherever you get podcasts. Today's episode is brought to you by LinkedIn. LinkedIn Jobs helps you find the qualified candidates you want to talk to faster. Post your job for free at linkedin.com/LockedOnNBA. My name is Matt Moore. I'm the senior NBA writer for the Action Network and co-host over at Locked On Nuggets, joined by David Ramil. You can find him on Twitter at DRamil, DRAMIL 1313. He is co-host over at Locked On Heat. David, big night in the NBA on Monday. Had a lot of games, had a lot of drama, had some good basketball. We start with the Toronto Raptors, who I wanted to talk about tonight, because somewhat, no Fred VanVleet, and yet somehow the Toronto Raptors keep being the team that you really probably don't want to run into on a random night in the NBA, as the Atlanta Hawks get caught 139-109 in a game that was competitive for a while before they tore it open. For me, the story of this game was Pascal Siakam, who I think has been honestly one of like the 10 best players in the league through these first 2 weeks, for whatever that's worth. That's how good he's been. Like that's how good he's been. The gap between him and a guy like Giannis Antetokounmpo might be wide, but Siakam tonight, 31 points, only shot 8 of 21, but he got to the line 16 times, 12 boards, 6 assists, plus 30, great defense, did it all. This Toronto team, even without Fred VanVleet, is tough.
Yeah. Vision 6-9 is coming together at just the right time. It seems like everything is breaking for Toronto, and Siakam has been fantastic. Just a dominant overall game. I'm not sure that he's added anything necessarily other than just a certain level of assertion to his game. The shot is falling perhaps with a little bit more frequency than it has in years past. And I know he's been criticized for being somewhat inconsistent. But this year, at least so far, he's been really, really good. The defense, as you mentioned, playmaking to another level, aggression. Went to the line, what was it, like 17 times tonight? Like he was everywhere putting his imprint on the game. And I'm glad that you pointed it out because he has been something that's really stood out to me. I think he's like one of the top 5 players right now in terms of like MVP ranking, the MVP, the NBA.com MVP ladder. I know that's going to change over the course of the season and everything else, but I'm glad that he's getting that kind of recognition early on because he has been sensational and guiding them to a 4-3 record. So it's been fun to watch his continued evolution in Toronto.
Scotty Barnes, want to mention him as well, as he almost has a triple double in his first game back. 21 points, 7 rebounds, 8 assists for the reigning Rookie of the Year, along with 1 steal. Here's what was fascinating. Barnes has been a poor 3-point shooter. He goes 5 of 9 from 3 with an overall line of 7 of 14. So he was 2 of 5 inside the arc and 5 of 9 from beyond it. If Scotty Barnes is going to hit shots like that, you're going to give up 130 to the Raptors, especially with that Hawks defense. Look, the Hawks, once again, every time that you start to be like, hey, maybe, no, maybe not, maybe not. Trae Young tonight, 14 points on 13 shots. He was in lockdown. He had a triple-double with 14 points, 10 assists, and 10 turnovers. He had 10 turnovers. OG Anunoby was thieving. He had 6 steals tonight for Toronto. And the other big problem here is, honestly, the starters got waxed for Atlanta. If you let this Toronto bench, which doesn't play a lot of minutes and isn't very good, and that's why they don't play a lot of minutes, if you let them be positive, I don't know how much of a chance you're going to have versus the Raptors.
Are you concerned that Toronto's success is sustainable because of their lack of depth? I mean, it doesn't seem like they're going to get anything to add to that? I mean, I guess there's potential for a midseason trade or something along those lines, but right now they just don't seem to have enough to carry them forward. I guess the return of Otto Porter Jr. is probably the biggest boost that you could expect. That's a solid role player there, a guy with championship experience, etc. So it's a good fit, and I'm curious to see how he does mesh in and add something to that second unit there. But Toronto. I know they've been slept on a bit. I know Raptors fans will always point to the fact that they don't get the kind of respect that they deserve. But having said that, I mean, there's a slough right now in the Eastern Conference. There's a lot of good teams out there that deserve recognition, and Toronto is one of them. So, do you buy more in Toronto or Atlanta at this point in the season and moving forward?
I think I'm kind of done doubting Toronto. I don't love their roster. I think that their ceiling is low, but their floor is just too high. Like, a lot of this is just like, what's the approach that you take night in and out? Now, the point here about the minutes, I think, is a valid one, right? Like, eventually, aren't they gonna run out of steam?
Right.
Nurse's thing has kind of been like, no. Like, he's just been kind of like, no, we're just gonna ride it. And that's what he did last season. That's how they wound up passing both Cleveland and Chicago to snag the 5 seed. Not that it did them a lot of good versus Philadelphia. My kind of thing here is, what I continue to wonder is, it's surprising me because I have all the respect in the world for what Toronto does, and they're going to be a pain in the ass no matter what in the playoffs. Like, they'll be a hard out, and they might sneak up on some team that's a little bit fraudulent. Like, if they wind up in the 4 spot, or if they wind up in the 5 spot again, or in a 6-3, they can catch a team that's not for real because they will simply grind you down.
Right.
I just still don't really have the belief that they're able to rise up to the level of being that. Now, but maybe the difference here is like Siakam or Barnes, right? If those guys go another level up, maybe that's where it gets to. I think we've seen Siakam rise and fall too much to have a lot of faith in him. Barnes is his second season. It's hard to believe that he's going to make that kind of a leap. Right. The other guys are really good. They're fascinating because you absolutely cannot count them out, and yet you cannot pencil them in either. Like, you cannot go either way with Toronto, and that's what I think makes them fascinating. You have to respect them for what they're able to accomplish, but you also have to maintain a level of caution because of how they have to get it done.
That's fair. It's a good deep roster, but it does have flaws, and it could all blow up if not managed correctly, which is what we saw last year too. So I don't know. It's I like their talent. I like their commitment to the bit there with the size and length and everything else, but at the same time, it always feels like they're just missing some key ingredient, and I'm not sure what it could be.
Let's take a break. We'll come back and we'll talk about a big question, which is, are the Utah Jazz for real? Yeah. We'll do that when we come back on Locked On NBA. But first, I've got to tell you about LinkedIn Jobs. These days, every new potential hire can feel like a high-stakes wager for your small business. You want to be 100% certain that you have access to the best qualified candidates available, and that's why you have to check out LinkedIn Jobs. LinkedIn Jobs helps you find the right people for your team faster and for free. Hiring, I've done it before. It's a stressful process. You want to make sure that you're going through the right candidates, that you're not wasting your time, but you also don't want to overlook one. That's an underrated part of this. There's a big pull in these, advertisements that really talk about, saving you time. But the bigger thing is, like, you also don't want to overlook getting the right candidate. And that's one of the things that LinkedIn Jobs does really well with their screening questions. They make it easy to focus on candidates with just the right skills and experience, so you can quickly prioritize who you'd like to interview and then hire. It's why small businesses rate LinkedIn Jobs #1 in delivering quality hires versus the leading competitors. LinkedIn Jobs helps you find the qualified candidates you want to talk to faster. You can post your job for free at linkedin.com/lockedonnba. That's linkedin.com/lockedonnba to post your job for free. Terms and conditions apply. We'll be right back on Locked On NBA. Back here on Locked On NBA, thanks for joining us and making us part of your day. Make sure that your second listen after making us your first listen is the Locked On Sports Today podcast, all the biggest stories in sports. Follow it wherever you get podcasts. Okay, so I think one of the other big stories that we got to talk about from Monday night is, the Utah Jazz take a loss to the Grizzlies they pull out the win versus the Grizzlies over the weekend, and everyone's kind of like, yeah, but I mean, come on. Eventually the story's going to end, right? And the Utah Jazz get it done again. They went back-to-back set, 121-105, control the game throughout. And another win as Utah goes to 6-2 on the season, undefeated at Vivid. Lauri Markkanen, who I have been touting since last year and in Eurobasket and into this year, 31 points, 11 rebounds, 2 assists. Absolutely phenomenal game. He was the best player on the floor, including, I think, John Morant, who had 37, 5, and 4, despite the fact that he was sick. That's a part of this, I'll say. Like, Memphis is shorthanded anyway with their injuries.
No Desmond Bane, yeah.
Jaren Jackson, Desmond Bane's out with illness. The whole team is going through it. Steven Adams has a jaw injury, and misses the second half. That's obviously, I think, a problem. But look, Markkanen goes for 31. Mike Conley chips in with 5 threes for 15 points. The Jazz wind up hitting 19 3-pointers to Memphis's only 6. Look, it's early still, but David, like, I'll tell you, I kind of think Utah is not going to be one of the best teams in the Western Conference by season's end. But I'm not sure that they are capable of making enough trades for them to be one of the worst. I think they have talent for them to be one of the worst teams, and I think it's possible they might actually be in the playoff race come April. It's possible, at least.
Yeah. Were we sure that they were tanking? I mean, it seemed that way. You trade away 2 stars and Donovan Mitchell and Rudy Gobert, and you think to yourself, well, it's pretty evident that you're not planning on winning a lot of games, but you get just the right mix back. You add Colin Sexton too, and Markkanen's been great, as you mentioned. They've got a really a fun team. Like, I mean, they're more fun this year than they have been over the last couple of seasons, because there was always that sense that, well, you know what this Utah team is going to be like in the playoffs. As good as Gobert and Mitchell were, there was always a sense that maybe they weren't going to work out and get it, pull it together. But this is, I think the expectations are so low here that they're just much more fun. Like, you watch them playing, and they're a great team to watch. They play defense well. They have up and down nights, but who doesn't? They're 6-2. Somehow they're still knocking off a potential title contender in Memphis. Yeah, shorthanded Memphis Grizzlies team, whatever, but still a good Utah win, and Markkanen, just getting a great performance out of him. 18 points from Malik Beasley off the bench. They're a really good team. I don't know. I don't think it's sustainable, right? Like, it's fun to talk about, and this is going to be one of these teams that we look back in March and April and we go, remember, how fun they were in October and November, because I just don't see it sustainable. Like they were one injury away, and then all of a sudden, they shut things down, and then they revert back to the norm. They can't be one of the best teams in the Western Conference. Like, that's for sure, as you mentioned. But I just don't see them winning more than 40 games either. So I don't know. And then look, if you had said that the Utah team was going to win anywhere close to 40 games, I think a lot of people would have been surprised at the start of the season. Here we are talking about them at 6-2, and I don't know. I love the way that they play right now. I just don't think it's sustainable over the length of the season.
If you enjoyed Houston Rockets fans, let me get Utah Jazz fans in your mentions next, David. So,
do they want it though? Like, I don't know. I'm like honest question. Like, I'm not trying to alienate any more fan bases here, but what do Utah fans want? Do they want to go to the playoffs with a team that, was blown up earlier this offseason? Or what's the end goal here? Like, do you want to be like the 8th seed or play-in tournament team? Or would you rather, tank for early positioning in the Wembanyama sweepstakes? So that's what I'm curious about.
I think it's tough if you're the front office. And the reason it's tough, if you're like, no, it's not, you need Victor Wembanyama. There is an obligation, I think, to the players, the team, the guys that are out there. Like, those guys are getting paid, and they're going out there and they're playing. And these guys are playing well, and they're playing together, and they're playing hard. And it's hard to I think it's difficult to really be like, yeah, but I'm going to need you to suck a little more. If you can just back off being so good. Like, I have to make sure that you're not good. I think that gets tough on a human level. I think it gets tough in a team dynamic level. I think it's tough at a culture level. It's one thing when you go in and you design a team purposefully to kind of be that, but Utah didn't really have an opportunity to do that. Like, Utah had to take on contracts in order to get those deals done, and the result is they still have all these guys. Now, look, maybe Danny Ainge is able to pull off like a mega trade and sends like everybody out in a flurry. But they play. I will say, if nothing else, I'll say this: Will Hardy is showing a lot of intelligence in how to get the most out of the roster. Like, this is not a case where Hardy has a style and he's like hammering the square peg into a round hole. He is absolutely tailoring what they have. They have shooting. This team is one of the best in the league in terms of volume 3-point shooting. They took 4 mid-range shots tonight. 4. Everything else was at the rim or 3, mostly from 3. If you look at how much they're winning the math battle in these games, it's startling. They took 47 threes out of 89 shots.
Unbelievable.
Like, over half their shots were from 3-point range. That's how you maximize things, right? And maybe that's one of the things they'll be listening. Okay, we're gonna work on our mid range now. We need to open up the mid range. But I just continue to be really impressed with them. And if nothing else, they do have to make those moves for the long term benefit of the roster and the franchise, rather. I really got to credit Lauri Markkanen, who's been like the best player on a 6-2 team. He's been phenomenal, and he's been good on defense as well. He had 5 stocks tonight. He had 1 steal, 4 blocks. Kelly Olynyk had 7 points on 7 shots, and he fouled out, 4 steals, and he was just like, he does things very, very well. Colin Sexton, I thought, bounced back from a pretty rough performance in Denver on Friday. He played 24 minutes. He had 15 points. I thought his shot selection was a lot better in this game. Taylor Horton Tucker, who I've never been high on, and who has added he's added weight in terms of he's just like a bigger dude now. He's kind of a truck. It's working. Like, he's kind of a bulldog now. And I like him more now than I did with the Lakers. So I think there's a lot to appreciate about this team. I will say this, regardless of how this ends up, I've really enjoyed watching the Utah Jazz play basketball.
Yes.
This season.
Yeah, undoubtedly. I mean, fun team. Did this happen before with Boston too, when Ainge was in charge there? Like, did they have that one year where they outperformed expectations? I know Isaiah Thomas was a big part of that. Yeah, Utah has to find a way to bring Jay Crowder back there because he was such a part of that. Kelly Olynyk too, right? I mean, bring back the whole Boston Celtics team, have them overachieve in Utah too, and throw things off completely. And then look, we saw this a few years ago. I can't remember exactly what season it was with the Phoenix Suns where they outsized expectation. What, 2014-15 Suns, I think, or 13-14 Suns, where they performed really well and they were blowing things up, and then they wound up having a really solid season, and that kind of threw off the time frame for the development, right, of this team. Like they thought they were going to be a lot better, and they had that one good season, and then things kind of fell apart from there. So I wonder. I mean, like, at some point you have to either commit to blowing things up, rebuilding that way, or continuing to push. Like, if this is your team and you think this is realistic, that you can continue to win games and have sustained success, then you have to find a way to add to it. And I don't know if that means trading Mike Conley or what. I'm not sure what you're going to get to help this team, but at some point you have to figure out whether or not this is a roster you want to continue to build with or to blow up altogether.
One more thing before we take a break and we come back, and we're going to do our weekly segment, which is the on-off split, where David talks about something off-court and I talk about something on-court. I do want to give a quick mention of my favorite continuing trend in the NBA, and that's Mike Budenholzer and his absurd domination over division teams. The Bucks barely get by the Pistons, who really did make a run at them tonight. Cade Cunningham continues to show a lot this season. He's been phenomenal, but the Bucks get the win. Under Mike Budenholzer, the Milwaukee Bucks are now 59-9 versus division teams straight up. That's a ridiculous percentage. I talk a lot about this in my various platforms, whether it's my betting podcast Buckets or on Locked On Nuggets or wherever. If you want to rack up a really good regular season record, there's 3 types of games you need to win. You need to win your home games, you need to beat the bad teams, the teams under 500, and you need to win your division games. And the Bucks are absolutely proof of that, because they take care of those 3 categories, and every year they have a stellar record. Like, David, this is one of the things that when you're judging how good an NBA team is going to be in the regular season, not playoffs, just regular season, if you want to be able to project them out, is look for games like this, a probably sub 500 opponent at home that's a division opponent that checks all 3 boxes for me. The Bucks, this is how the Bucks are going to win 50 plus games this season.
Yeah, I can't disagree with that. They're a really, really good team. And shout out to Detroit too. I'm glad you pointed out Cunningham because he was sensational. Had missed a couple shots towards the end there when they were trying to keep it close, but they wouldn't have gotten that close without his overall performance there. So he's having a really good season. But yes, Milwaukee continues to dominate. Like I for all the positivity regarding the moves in Philadelphia and elsewhere, you couldn't just discount what the Milwaukee Bucks have done over the last couple seasons, and they've just continued to find ways to win, even without Chris Middleton, who's a big part of their success.
Let's take a break. We'll come back and we're going to do the on-off split where we'll talk about something off-court and something on-court. We'll do that when we come back on Locked On NBA. Thanks for making Locked On NBA your first listen today. For your second listen, check out the Locked On Sports Today podcast. From the games that matter the most to the biggest stories in sports, go beyond the scoreboard and behind the scenes with local experts and insights only Locked On can provide. Locked On Sports Today, available on this app, YouTube, and wherever you get podcasts. Final segment here with David Ramil on a Tuesday. Thanks for joining us. Really appreciate you guys being with us. Okay, so we're going to do the on-off split now. Every week we take a look at what something that's on court that matters and something off court that matters. Last time we did this, I believe you went first with the off court, so I'm going to start with the on court this week, and we'll switch it up every other week, David.
Sounds great.
I'll go ahead and do the on court. My on court is going to be the Sacramento Kings, who are going streaking, and it's actually going to be an element that I think is really important, and it's diversity of play styles and redundancy of skill sets. So De'Aaron Fox goes down knee soreness. He leaves the game at halftime versus the Charlotte Hornets in the game that the Kings were down in. And Davion Mitchell, second-year man, comes in and plays absolutely phenomenal. He goes for 23 points, 9 of 11 shooting. And this has been one of the weird things. Like they trade Tyrese, they had Tyrese Halliburton, and they had De'Aaron Fox, and they added Davion Mitchell last year. Now they trade Halliburton for Sabonis, and honestly, Sabonis has been a little underwhelming this season. He keeps having foul trouble. That popped up again in this game. But what they've kind of built is high-level guard play, a fast offense, and big defensive wings. And they with like one key shooter, and that formula, whether it's Malik Monk or Kevin Huerter, who was phenomenal and has been great this season. Huerter had 26 tonight, 5 of 10 from 3, 8 of 16 from the field. He was huge in getting them back into that game and eventually getting the win. But when you've got these guys like Davion Mitchell, who's also good on defense, but can create, you have this redundancy. It's really important to be able to have this in the regular season, that you can't just absolutely – some teams, I think, they build their rosters with lots and lots of wings, which the Kings do have, but their ones and their fives, they kind of have who they have. And the Kings have built, I think, a lot of redundancy in terms of the roster, and that allowed them to get past a Hornets team that's been surprisingly plucky. Like this Charlotte Hornets team is not bad, and that's a huge credit to Steve Clifford for that ball. So this was actually a really good win for the Kings on the road. They're streaking 2 wins in a row. Here we go, baby. The Kings are back. But that redundancy and that duplicity of assets and having guys like Huerter and Malik Monk, and then also having guys like Davion Mitchell step in for De'Aaron Fox, I think is a big deal. What do you have for us for the off-court split this week, David?
To no one's surprise, I thought it was important to talk about the Kyrie Irving situation in Brooklyn. Yeah, I hate doing it. I wish it wasn't something I had to talk about at all, right? And in tonight's game against the Indiana Pacers, about 6 or 7 people sitting in the front row there wearing not anti-Semitic, but again, condemning anti-Semitism shirts along the baseline there, and apparently Kyrie Irving acknowledged them and says, "I'm glad that you're here," somewhat sarcastically, according to the reporter here, but. My issue is, and there are so many people who have spoken about this already, so it almost feels like, there's not, I won't say there's no point in adding to this because there's always a point. I am old enough, and I'm sure you are too, Matt, to remember when we could talk about these, and it was pretty agreed that they were pieces of crap, that they were evil people, that we should just condemn any kind of belief regarding Nazis. I don't know how the lines have been blurred to the point where we could say, well, let's hear both sides or anything like that. I know we could attribute it to a former president in office and things of that sort, but at the same time, evil is evil, and there's no way around that. As far as Kyrie Irving is concerned, my issue was being questioned by Nick Friedel of ESPN on Saturday and discussing that he's not promoting what many have labeled an anti-Semitic book and movie. And that's so erroneous, that because he didn't include a caption that it's not promoting. And I'm gonna do something that my journalism teachers would all hate me for, which is just read the definition out loud. The publicization of a product, organization, or venture so as to increase sales or public awareness. That is the definition of a promotion. And with Kyrie Irving and his platform, for whether he includes a caption or not, he's absolutely promoting something that is pretty widely accepted as anti-Semitism. And so for him to just say, you know what, it wasn't, I don't believe that, I believe in all religions, well, it's clear that you don't. And I know that there's an end game for him there, at least he sees one. It becomes increasingly more difficult for any of us to figure it out, because he just seems like he challenges one thing from one day to the next, and it's impossible to keep track of it. So to me, I just wanted to pick at that a little bit, because I think it's important. So many people, every time there's a post now on social media, and social media is trash anyway, so it's hard to parse through anything and find any truth or reality in it there. But you post something, even a comment about the people sitting on the baseline wearing again, those shirts that they were wearing, and people are like, oh, it's all a narrative. He wasn't promoting anything. It's like, no, he clearly was. Even if he didn't add a caption to it, even if he didn't say, you know what, I like this particular passage in chapter 13, even if he didn't say anything specific, he posted a link or a picture of a link to a book that is well known for its pretty rampant anti-Semitism. That's absolute promotion. He needs to be punished for this. I'm not sure what the league can do. And I know it's a slippery slope when you start talking about policing what players say and what they post on social media. But when it comes to this kind of ideology, something absolutely needs to be done about it. So that's my off court split, excuse me.
It was well said. Made some great points. I think, Antonio in the comments here is like, can I ask you something? Kai said the book is on Amazon. Why are you not talking about that? Okay. So there's a lot of stuff on Amazon I imagine I would have a problem with. I can do both, is like my answer to all this. The movie being on Prime is a problem. The book being on Amazon is a problem. Kyrie promoting it is an NBA problem. It's in the realm of...
That's exactly right.
Of the NBA discussion, because it has to do with how Jewish fans feel this being spread by a player.
Right.
Like, I think absolutely, if you want to say you should do both, that's great. My issue is when this is used as a deflection. Like, well, let's not worry about Kyrie. Let's go. No. Kyrie's spread is massive. He has millions of followers on Instagram. This goes back. Like, this has been my concern since the flat Earth thing. And some people say that he was trolling. He talked about it seriously on the JJ.
It's dangerous. It's dangerous.
Like, there are science teachers that have said they've had students be like, well, I've heard from Kyrie and I looked it up and this is what's actually happening. This stuff spreads and it's an issue. Like, honestly, I was like, look, these are issues that are, when we talk about the topics of that film and the book, those are issues that are beyond my expertise. What I will say is there's a Rolling Stone article that outlines what the book and film say. Pablo Torres for ESPN.
Yeah.
We did some stuff today and talked about it on both podcast and on air. And there was a New York Post article that outlined very clearly some of the elements in book and film. So there are things out there, I think, like, I would recommend consuming those things if you want to understand what the big deal is. If you're like, why is this a thing? Those will reveal why this has been so offensive. I would imagine Kyrie's response is that the subjugation and tyranny that his ancestors and him and his family have experienced as a black man also exist. And he's right on that one particular element.
Right.
But it doesn't mean that these other things aren't going to be criticized and examined. And like, look, honestly, I'll tell you, if you do some Googling, there are other elements. There are other instances of this with other players. Stephen Jackson, LeBron James, even. Like, there is at least a fringe element where this has been around NBA discussions.
Yeah.
And that's concerning.
Absolutely.
It is. It just is concerning. And it doesn't mean that the issues that the players bring up are invalid when it comes to Black Lives Matter. I don't believe that. But if we talk about what the league can do, if we bring this back to basketball, the league can't really do anything, and the Nets are unwilling to do something. This is going to be, I think, one of those things that's handled the quietest. Like, everyone just wants this to go away. Like, that's what they want. The Nets just want to get through this year, and then they won't re-sign Kyrie. Then whoever wants to take that shot on him, that's their problem then, right? And so they're hoping just to basically sweep this under the rug. That to me is like how the league wants to treat this, that they don't want to confront this problem head on for a number of reasons that are pretty tricky and honestly a little scary.
Yeah, look, I cover the Heat, obviously. Former Heat player Myers Leonard issued a racial slur. And he was traded. He was suspended. He was traded. He was bought out by the Oklahoma City Thunder, the trade partner with the Heat, and he does not have a job in the NBA. And yes, you can point to the fact that maybe, he's slow-footed and he's not necessarily an NBA player, but he was pretty effective in Portland for a few years there, and he was pretty good in Miami in their run to the finals in the NBA bubble. And yet he doesn't have a job now. So what's the difference here? Is it that we're just talking about a much more popular player at Kyrie? And that's why I feel like there should be some kind of an official statement, an official punishment, something a little bit more just than letting it passively go away. And that doesn't work. I mean, I know that the league gets a lot of unfair praise, undeserving praise, I should say, for being so forward thinking when in fact they are somewhat pedestrian in other efforts there. So I don't think that's entirely 100% correct here, but they can't pick and choose exactly where they start to dole out these kind of punishments here. Another thing too, I just want to add to this is also the fact that a lot of people are criticizing Nick for continuing to press press Kyrie on the issue here, because Kyrie wanted to dismiss it and he did not. He did not answer the question, which is something that Friedel wanted to continue to point out. He's like, you're not answering my question. So he wanted to keep adding to it. Again, the comments here is, well, why don't you just leave it alone? Talk about basketball, bro. This is basketball. This is all basketball related. This isn't about just X's and O's. This is about the game these people play and the lives that they live, and the fact that we all are invested in this. As journalists, as fans, as both in some cases, we all have a part in watching these players, and we want them to do the best. And like, nobody was criticizing them. Well, a vast majority of people weren't criticizing them for, wearing shirts that had Black Lives Matter or things of this sort. So, like, why are we criticizing them? Why are we criticizing a media member, a journalist, for continuing to ask the right questions and pressing Kyrie and getting him to try to explain his point of view? Like, it's not a narrative here. And I know that's a catch-all that people use too frequently. Oh, he's just pushing narratives. He was asking him a question. He gave Kyrie an opportunity to give a well-thought-out, clear answer, and Kyrie backed away from it. Because I don't think he has one. I don't think he knows what he's doing half the time. He's always seen himself as the smartest person in the room, and I don't think that's quite the case. Like, there's a reason why he's not in the Boston Celtics anymore. There's a reason why he's alienated teammates in Cleveland and Boston and eventually in Brooklyn too. So I think it's problematic there. And he was given a chance to explain his perspective and why he did this and why he was promoting something, and all he wanted to do is dismiss it, that I wasn't promoting it, that I'm just sharing it. Well, it's the same thing. It's the same damn thing. And so it's just problematic to me. And I guess we should wrap it up, because I'm sure we've probably turned off a lot of listeners by this point.
Kyrie like 16 points. No, repeat his stat line and get out of here. It's an ugly situation. It's going to continue. My only thing on this is, if you're listening to this and you're wondering, like, well, what actually happens? Like, how would he be held accountable? the comparison I would tell you is the same as it is with every NBA situation. There will not be accountability until the money is threatened. That's how it works, is until sponsors change their mind on not just Kyrie, but the Nets because of the situation. There won't be an impact. Once there is, oh boy, the league's real quick to sit up and take notice of the situation. It's ugly. It continues to be ugly. The Nets continue to be an ugly situation. We'll see how it shakes out, and we'll have it covered here on Locked On NBA. Thanks for joining us. Really appreciate you guys listening to the show, and make sure to leave your 5-star reviews. Tomorrow, John Corrales, Jake Madison with their edition of the show. Check us out all week long. So many fantastic hosts on Locked On NBA. For David Ramil, my name is Matt Moore. Thanks for joining us. We'll see you guys again next time on Locked On NBA.